What if the earliest Christians left us a short, practical handbook? How to live, how to worship, how to test leaders, and how to stay ready for the Lord's return. Then sadly, it was lost for centuries, but happily rediscovered in 1873. This is the Didache, the teaching of the apostles. And why the Didache matters is because it's really an early discipleship manual of the late first and the early second centuries. It's a small text, just 16 chapters, and it reads like a guide for new disciples. And more importantly, it echoes the teachings of Jesus. It carries the moral heartbeat of the Torah, the law covenant. And it shows how the first communities practiced prayer, fasting, baptism, and the meal of thanksgiving. So it's not polished theology. No, it's field instructions, if you like, short, direct, and memorable. So if you've ever asked, what did following Jesus look like before the large and the ornate basilicas and the big and complicated creeds before they appeared? Well, this is the window. In this episode, we will explore what the Didache is, where it came from, and what it teaches, and why it still corrects and inspires the disciples of Jesus today. Then in the next videos, we will set the Didache beside Jesus' own words in Matthew chapter 5, 17 and 18 to ask, what does it mean that Jesus fulfilled the law and the prophets? What does it mean? Now, early Christian writers mentioned a text called the Teaching of the 12 Apostles. Then the trail for this document, it went cold. Happily though, in 1873, a Greek bishop, Philotheos Bryennios, found it in an 11th century manuscript in Constantinople. Now, scholars generally place this composition to the late 1st to the early 2nd century. Some sections could be even earlier, close enough to the New Testament in that it preserves, if you like, the actual rhythm of the first congregations or churches. So think of the Didache as a practical manual in the formation of ethics, worship practices, leadership guidance, and watchfulness. Contents are built around 4 sections. Chapters 1 through to 6 show 2 ways. Chapters 7 and 8 about baptism and fasting and the Lord's Prayer. Then chapters 9 and 10, the Thanksgiving meal, which we know as the Lord's evening meal or the Eucharist. And then finally, chapters 11 through to 16, it's about the prophets and the leaders and the end. So 4 movements, the 2 ways of life and death. Then practical worship about baptism, fasting, and prayer. Then the Thanksgiving meal. And finally, discernment and leadership, ending in urgent watchfulness. So the Didache opens with a choice. 2 roads. First, the way of life. Love God, who made you. Love your neighbor as yourself. Then the golden rule, but in a sort of guardrail form. Just listen to this. What you wouldn't want done to you, don't do to another. And bless those who curse you. Pray for your enemies. Fast for those who persecute you. Be generous. Share. Don't be double-tongued or double-minded. This is the way of life. Then there is the way of death, and it contains a sober list of community destroyers, if you like: murder, adultery, exploitation, sorcery, greed, hypocrisy. The text also explicitly forbids abortion and the killing of newborns, which provides a really stark window into the ancient world of child sacrifice. And it warns against slander and hard-heartedness. And the tone is very, very Jesus-like. You see, the Sermon on the Mount turned into a disciples' checklist, so to speak: love, mercy, truthfulness, generosity. And indeed, it also echoes Deuteronomy's life and death choice, the book which Jesus himself taught from. So the earliest Christians, they didn't treat Jesus and his teachings as some sort of shortcut around the law's moral core. No, no, no. They actually embodied that core. So the two ways, life and death, choose the life-giving path. Then baptism, fasting, and the Lord's Prayer. See, baptism is simple and flexible. Use running water if you can. If not, any water will do. Prefer cold? Okay. Warm is also fine. If immersion isn't possible, pour water 3 times on the head. And those being baptized, and if possible the one baptizing them, should fast beforehand. And the rhythm of the fasting, well, fast on the 4th and 6th days of the week, not as the hypocrites who fast on the 2nd and the 5th days of the week. It forms a people who mark time by repentance and mercy, and not by performance. You see, the Didache says, pray the Lord's Prayer several times daily. Let Jesus' words pace your day. It's formation by repetition, not in the babbling of many words, but letting the right words shape your heart. And in the Thanksgiving meal, the Lord's evening meal of the Eucharist, the meal prayers, they are short and grateful. See, over the cup and the bread, they give thanks for the knowledge of God, for faith, for the gathering of the church. You know, there's one lovely line which pictures the bread once scattered on the hills, now gathered into one loaf. And it encourages, so may your congregational church be gathered from the ends of the earth. Now, only the baptized share this table. Now, this doesn't make it as some sort of exclusive club, no. See, communion is a covenant participation, which does require being part of that communion, baptism in other words. The focus is on thanksgiving, on unity and hope. Less of the ritual performance, more a family meal in God's kingdom. See, as the scattered grain became one loaf, so gather your congregation. Now, on the question of prophets, teachers, and local elders, well, counsel is very straightforward. Welcome these ones as gifts, but test their character. See, the early church was mobile. Apostles, prophets, and teachers, they traveled between house churches. You know, the Didache says, welcome them as you would the Lord, but test their character. See, if a prophet asks for money, or won't work, or stays too long, beware. A true prophet's life should match the message. And at the same time, local communities should appoint their own bishops and deacons or elders and ministerial servants. And these are to be humble, truthful, not greedy, in order that the generosity which exists isn't exploited and the flock is properly shepherded. Because there can be tension between the one with some sort of charismatic gift and stable leadership. Well, that wasn't a problem in the early first century, in the early congregation. Why? Because of its wisdom. See, love everyone, don't fund manipulation. Then watchfulness and the end. The final chapters calls for the congregation to be watchful. Deception will increase. Love may grow cold, but those who endure will be saved. Expect trial. Expect the world deceiver. Expect the Lord's appearing. See, for small congregations without social power, this wasn't some doom-laden document. No, no, no. It was a holy focus for them to keep their lamps lit, so to speak. Keep them simple and lit. Stay reconciled. Keep the table. Pray the prayer. So what we have setting up these series is this: the Didache and the comparison with Matthew 5:17 through the 17 and 18, where we read, verse 17, Jesus says, "Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For I tell you truly, until heaven and earth pass away, not a single jot, not a stroke of a pen will disappear from the law until everything is accomplished." So, how does the Didache fit that picture? Well, there are three lenses for our next episodes to examine that. The first, moral fulfillment. See, there are no legal loopholes. The Didache's two ways show the law's heart as it actually is: the love of God and the love of neighbor, fulfilled in practical obedience, in generosity, in enemy love and truthfulness. And we'll compare these lines with Matthew's chapters 5, 6, and 7, the Sermon on the Mount. The ritual simplicity under kingdom priorities is the second point. See, baptism and the Lord's evening meals are simple and flexible. They're not abolishing the law. It's a sort of ordering practice into Jesus' kingdom: mercy over sacrifice, unity, and performance. And finally, it's about the prophets, discernment, and the law's goal. See, the law aimed at a people, holy and just. And the Didache's tests for teachers actually protects that goal. So ask yourself, does this echo Jesus' warnings about false prophets and the tree being recognized by its fruit? In short, the Didache doesn't feel like a community that has ditched the law. No, it feels like a people learning to live its fulfillment in Jesus. So, what are the takeaways and call to action? Well, the Didache gives us a congregation that actually trains ordinary believers and the formation of them through prayer and fasting. It is simplicity in worship that unites and thanks, and discernment that welcomes the gifts while at the same time guarding the flock. So in the next episodes, we will set specific lines from the Didache alongside Matthew's chapters 5, 17 and 18, and indeed the rest of the Sermon on the Mount, 5, 6 and 7. And we'll do that point by point. Now, in the last video I published a link where this document, the Didache, may be found. So here it is again. It's the earlychristianswritings.com. Now, the translation I will be using is by Charles H. Houle, because it is presented by chapter and verse that we are familiar with in our translations today. So when we compare, it's going to be a lot easier. So if this has helped, please like and share, and we'll see you all next week.